We have some aesthetic work that we're going to do, some optional aesthetic work, I should say, on the VFR750 project that I think you'll find interesting. So let's get right to it in this video from Moto-Resto LLC. Alright folks, welcome back. It's Tom, Moto-Resto LLC here in Bradenton, Florida. This is my VFR750 if you haven't seen it before. We're going to do some optional, but I think interesting aesthetic work on this bike. And what I have here is an aftermarket rear cowling. It's called a Solo Seat or a Solo option, seat option cowling or something. The nomenclature is irrelevant I think at this point, but what this is designed to do is to go back here without the seat being modified, without anything at all, and it hooks in a certain way and bolts in a certain way, which I'll show you here in a minute. And it's really an aesthetic thing. It's like that racing look where you have the cowling on the back there instead of a full two-person seat or a pillion, depending on what part of the world you're in. That's what we're going to do. And again, this is a product from Airtech Streamlining out in California. They make these and a whole bunch of other stuff for motorcycles. I recommend them pretty strongly. This is the second part or parts plural that I've gotten from them. This is a relatively small piece compared to the last pieces I got from them years ago, which was for the ZX10 project. I got both side panels from them. Now when you get something from Airtech, it doesn't come with any holes. It usually comes with any tabs, but as we're going to see here in a minute when we go over some of the photos, there's supposed to be some tabs here that line up with these slots there. This one off the back, the tail end goes in there. That's fine. And I'll show you about these bolts here in a minute. But there's supposed to be some tabs that come down and line up in there. It'll make more sense when I show you the photos of an actual unit. And I'll explain that here in a second. I'm going to do this a little differently and show you on the big screen. I hope the frame rate works out here. I'm not sure, but this is some photos that were provided me from a customer and a friend of mine, Dave. And he's very, very helpful on these things because he has an 86 VFR700, so it's essentially the same bodywork. This is an original piece that you're looking at from the left side, and you can see that tang right there I'm talking about. The one on the rear is right there. And what we haven't discussed yet is the pad that goes across the front. We're going to be making that as well. That's going to be a little bit of a challenge, but let's deal with this first. So there's a left side shot of it. There's a shot of the inside of the pad. Let me get back to that. That is a shot looking from the top, of course, of the actual fiberglass and the pad. Let's go ahead and talk about the pad now. I want to go back to that photo we had before. This pad is kind of complicated, and I'll show you what we're going to use to make that here in a little bit, but this is obviously the inside. This is the bottom. Has the two studs that are made into it, and then the upholstery that wraps around. Now you'll notice that these edges taper inwards. In other words, they're not flat up and down, and obviously if they did it flat up and down, you'd see the edge of the upholstery from the side. So they wrap it around the back side with a relief, and so this area inside is thinner than this area down here. I'll show you how we'll deal with that too. There's also some angle differences with these two mounting points that jive with the ones on the actual cowling, and they're at a slightly different angle as well. We have to kind of figure that out. All right. So that's the pad part. In summary, when I show you the piece I'm going to use, maybe we can draw some pictures on it and show you exactly how I'm going to cut it. And there's it from the front with the upholstery on it, and you can see that the angle of the dangle is tapered upwards on each side, and then the bottom has that little kind of almost banana, slightly to the top too, shape to it. All right, so that's what we're going to do. I have the dimensions too that my friend David provided to me. Here is the dimensions. I don't have a width, but it doesn't matter. I'm pretty sure I can guess that. And that's about it. So naturally we have two distinct phases or levels or operations we need to perform on this, and one is making the cowling fit properly to the bike, which is pretty easy, and then the other one is going to be making the backing piece to wrap some upholstery around that piece to make this pad that goes on here. You can see those features I was referencing before on the front of this. I'll talk about the pad real quick, but I really want to focus on this first. This is that solid PVC that you can get at the store. In this case, it's brick molding for around a door. And being as PVC and solid, it's a good plastic to work with. It's pretty light and it's easy to machine. So I cut a piece off that's the appropriate length. Actually, I went a little long and I machined it down. So the first thing I did is I squared it all up with a fly cutter on both sides. And then I just did the ends with an end mill, the side of an end mill. I side milled it with an end mill basically. And got it all squared up. So now I have a rectangle piece here to work with. And this will be shaped into whatever the piece is that we need to make as far as the shape goes. But I'm going to have to set this aside. Like I said, we need to concentrate on that first. So the first thing we're going to do is going to get the bolts out of there. You see there's 2 bolts on each side. These bolts go into the seat. So this is a good solid purchase in there. It ain't in a plastic. It's actually in a metal threaded portion. And so we're going to go ahead and get those out. We'll lay this in. We need to make some marks on the cowling because I want to make some tabs that go into these and just glue them on the inside of that. It should be really, really easy and really quick to do that. Do any light sanding on the edges because these things do not come finished, as I said before. When they have to be installed, they usually have to be massaged. And this is actually pretty close to what I'm going to need, obviously, but I'm going to do some light sanding on the edges just to clean it up. Then we'll work on those tabs and get this thing where we can locate for the holes, and then we'll be able to install this thing and get it in the place it needs to go. Because at that point, we really don't need to take it off until it needs to be painted, or going to be painted, because we'll work on the piece that's going to go in this place for the back pad. These aren't the correct bolts. I don't exactly know what the correct bolts are. I think they're supposed to be slotted, to be honest with you, but that's not what was on here, and what was on here was butchered up. So what I ended up doing was I ended up actually just taking another bolt, an M6 threaded bolt, and I drilled in the back of this and then set a bolt in and Loctited it in, and that's all I'm going to use. These have the proper shoulder, you know, as far as them going in so far, because they don't want, you don't want to clamp down on the actual plastic. You just want to restrain the plastic. So these go in just like a kind of a head cover bolt, and then they bottom out and won't go any further, and then you won't snap the plastic on the between the seat and the actual cowl itself. So that's what these are for. So I don't have the right bolts for it. I don't even think they're available. I'm pretty sure, like I said, they're supposed to be slotted. We could do that. I mean, it's stainless, but just put it in the mill with a slotting saw and just make a nice slot on them. I might do that sometime, but anyway, doesn't really matter. I think the reason why the originals were slotted is because you're going to have to take this cowling off in the field to get the seat off, because the seat comes off from the back. It has to lift straight up. With that tang going into the slot, it can't do that without breaking it, of course. So you're going to have to pull that cowl off real quick, which is why it's 2 bolts and a couple of tabs here, 3 tabs, where it locks in to get the seat off, to get at your tools or your paperwork, whatever you have underneath there. In my case, I have the registration and insurance card there, so I may actually have to modify these to make them easier to do exactly what I described. So yeah, so those are the fasteners. Alrighty, now these Airtech Streamlining products require some modifications as far as even sanding the edges and making them fit better. And you might think that this would be the case on this one too, because of the way it kind of doesn't want to fit back here too well. But I think that's what that rear one is for. So we're going to have to come up with a way where we can make something where it kind of comes up from forward and snaps in or pops in. Because otherwise this is not going to be down. It's not going to look good. Now sanding down here to make this thing sit better, because it's hitting here first, ain't going to work, because over here we are already bottomed out on the seat. So that's the way I want it there. We're not going to go any further. So yeah, what we're going to have to do is come up with a way for this to snap in, even with this all the way down, with the proper bolt location. It's not going to be right back here without something to to snap it in or to hold that in right there where those slots are. I kind of wish they had made those. I don't know why they didn't put them into the mold. Yeah, that's, I don't know. So I think the first thing we're going to have to do is locate the holes. Scratch that. We're going to go ahead and work on these first because this thing's only going to go so far back and we already know where it needs to lie. So I'd rather do that first than come out and do the holes and then not have it right up here. So let's work from the back to the front. All right, here's an example of what we need to do when I was describing before with these panels. I didn't see this till just now. When we put this in the back where it's supposed to be, you see how this is really hitting up here and you got a space here and you got a space here. That's because this needs to be flattened out. In other words, it's kind of rounded out here where it needs to be flatter. This is again an example of what you need to do to massage these aftermarket panels in place. Not a bad thing. I'd rather have it heavy than light. It'd be too small. So I'm going to go ahead and off camera sand these flat and essentially clear up this line first because that definitely will guide where we need to put these little tabs on the side here. Alright, so we're pretty close. I'm going to leave it there. Got this line that sits in pretty good. Needs a little bit more, but good enough for now. That tab's down here, so we can still work that in later on. Because I need to do some fine sanding on the edges. Now, when you want to do these, you want to block sand it. So literally with a block and a piece of sandpaper. In this case, it's a piece of 60. I mean, I wanted to go quick with it. And you have to be very careful because it's a very thin line. High pressure area, low surface area, it's going to cut in really quick. We're good enough. But other side's the same. I had to sand a little bit off of that one too. So now what we're going to do is mark this with a pencil or something, maybe a piece of tape. And I got an idea what we're going to use for plastic. Can you guess what plastic we're going to use for this? Yep, you guessed it. The old Suzuki Gixxer side panels that I cut up to do the patchwork on the left lower fairing thing on this one. I think it'll work pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead off camera and cut a piece out of this that I think will work. I'm not sure exactly the size of it, but we'll figure that out. And then shave it down and check the width of it and so forth and figure out what we're going to do. The lower tape denotes the total width of the existing slot. And then we're going to denote the total length of it up here, but we're not going to be going that wide. We don't need to. All right, so here's the piece I came up with. It was a little thick for the slot, so I actually put it in the mill and side milled it thinner. So it fits pretty good. Now this piece, the way that side panel was, it has a little bit of a radius to it. A very slight one, you can see that. I'm going to play with it a little bit, just heat it up, bend it, and see if we can get that to go in. This is not the final shape, but I'm going to make it this wide. Hopefully make it this thick too. This is going to be fine with this thickness of material to go into that slot. As long as I get this accurate where it's located on the cowling, this will be fine. But I need this to fit in here so it's not pushing the cowling out. So, all right, it's sort of working, but I'm forgetting to incorporate one thing. I'll show you here what I mean. This does not need to be this long and go up inside this piece that far. In fact, what we need to do is take advantage of this little space here between the seat and the rear cowling here. And what we'll do is we'll cut this piece down so it's into the slot about a 1/4 inch or so. And then when this thing is glued in, when it pushes down past the seat, it'll pop inwards. In other words, there'll be a clearance for that. Because the original tab is part of this. It's on the same plane as the side of the cowling. So that wasn't an issue. But now that we're going to have some material on the inside, what we need to do is we need to provide clearance for that. This is our clearance right there. So I'm just going to mark this and we're going to cut it down, and it's going to make it harder to kind of figure out exactly where. Come on, Mark. It's going to make it harder to hold it in place to kind of figure out where exactly to put it, but we really know where to put it on this. I think once we get it really close, I'll finish up the edges, thin it out a little bit more, and then we'll just go ahead and put a small dab of super glue and tack it in place, even though that'll probably be pretty permanent on this fiberglass. This stuff loves super glue. And then we'll give it a shot, but I think that's going to work because then, like I said, all the material as far as it wanting to go that way is going to be in this space here. So again, it'll come around the seat, kind of spread out a little bit, spread out, and then drop down into the slot, and it should be in line with the cowling here. You see what I'm talking about now. I got that piece of plastic in shortened. Let me show you what I mean. It's just about that big. It's a little bit thick, but I'd rather have it thick than thin, but it isn't pushing it out now because the seat's not influencing it, so it's pretty much lined up. So that's going to work. I just need to finish this out, thin it out a little bit more, sand it up, dress it up a little bit, and then we'll do is I got to sand this off anyway, the smooth gel coat or painted part, whatever it is, so it'll get a tooth on the back side of here. Might narrow it up just a little bit more to make sure it fits in the slot, but yeah, because if I'm off a little bit and it hits the edge of the slot, I could always grind it or sand it or file it, but I really don't want to have to. But if I line everything up right, I should be okay. So I don't know, I live on the edge. We'll just try it as is, but I got to clean this part up first. Just tacked in, as I said, moment of truth. I'm sure I could get it out if I needed to, but I don't think I'm going to need to. So when it gets pushed down and the screw is in, this is holding this edge nicely in line. It's not bowing it out. It's not going to the moon, not going to NASA. This needs to work. This will hold this in a lot better. Pull it out. It's going to want to spread a little bit because it hits the seat. And then I think that'll be fine. I'm liking it. Liking it a lot. Come on out, you. There we go. Okay, folks, we got it in with the glue from hell, from that aircraft spruce kit, and yeah, she's going to be just fine like that. When we're locked in with a screw, wherever that goes up in here, that bolt, then this thing ain't going to go anywhere. It's not going to flop around. It's not going to do any bad stuff. Back here, it's good. So yeah, I think that'll work fine. This is a pretty simple operation here. The complicated stuff is going to be when we make that pad up front here. I don't even know if that'll be in this video, but yeah, because there's going to be some complicated stuff there. We got to figure out some stuff. Well, anyway, let me go ahead and make the other one of these tabs off camera. I'll get it installed, and then we'll go ahead and do the holes. And at that point, we'll reevaluate and see where we're at. All right, the other side's done. This was the side you saw me do. I'll show the other side. I had to block sand some of this down. This was actually leaning this way a little bit, and you have to follow the existing lines. Obviously, the seat is all the way down. You got to make sure that that's in place properly. It wasn't hitting this edge evenly. It was up over here, so I had to block that down, and what that did was it helped pull this down because this really wanted to pop out. But there's your tang or your tab, and when this thing is going to be down, it's going to be touching here, and then your hole is going to be somewhat up in this area. So that worked out pretty well, I think. It'll be secured there. These won't wobble around. I like this line kind of sitting inside the edge. It's not perfectly even, but this is an aftermarket part, and it's the way it is, you know. You got to deal with it the way it is. I don't even know if the originals fit that way or better, but they probably did. Yeah, so not bad. I kind of like it. It definitely feels nice and solid. A lot better with these tabs on it than before. It wanted to kind of wobble around even like this. So that locks it in nicely. So the next step now is we're going to go ahead and figure out where we're going to put the holes. That's actually pretty easy with a special tool that I use. I've shown this before. Let me go grab that and I'll show you what we're going to do with it. Okay, so I use an M6 bolt that I cut down the lathe as far as putting it into a point and then finish it up with a file. You don't need a lathe for this. You can use a drill press with a file. You can use a regular hand drill, clamp it in your vise and go to town on it, lash the trigger with a wire tie. This is pretty deep in here, so that's why I had to make a longer one, but hell, sometimes longer is better.
That's what she said.
Yes! Yes!
Knock it off. So we're going to go in, and when you're dealing with a different piece which is not flexible like this, you have to kind of watch out when you get it in there that it doesn't jam up or something, because you certainly don't have much of a purchase or turn it around rather. I can get in here with a pair of needle dicks if I need to. So really it's just a little bit above the surface there, you see? Just sticking out. And it's hierarchy of materials here, okay? The metal or the steel is harder than this fiberglass. And then all we do is we put this in place where it's supposed to be. We carefully get that down there and kind of pull it away as we go down. Let it go back in. You can kind of feel it. When it's dead solid right there, you're up against that piece. So we've got to make sure this is right. Unfortunately, it pushes it away a little bit, but that's what we got to work with. So we'll kind of go off of the feel of the thing. Take a little dead blow. I put some tape on it so it won't scratch the surface, and just give it some tappy tap tap. Not much. You don't want to drive the damn thing through the plastic or the fiberglass. You probably should be able to see it now. The little dimple is right there. As I double, triple check it. I don't just do it once. and compare it. So there's two of them exactly right next to each other right there. You can see right there that little tip is wanting to come through. So we're definitely right on the spot, you see. I wish the position of this hole was a little further back like this one here. It's probably close to about 3/16 off this way. And of course above it, the above it part I don't really care about. But the, you know, in order to get that over, we'd have to push this up forward. And then this, I think the alignment would be no good back here. Because then it doesn't want to sit right. I mean, we could do that and have some spacing back here, and you know, we don't have a problem with this hole because we can just enlarge that manually, which is why we don't go crazy on putting a hole in it right off the bat. So maybe we will do that. Maybe we'll go ahead and incorporate some space back here and make this body line the same even around the side. These things are designed the way I made them was so there's a little bit of play in here. And so I think that might work pretty well. I made them a little small, so I'm going to try that first. And like I said, we can just enlarge that hole around this hole. We know the height's going to be the same, so let me try that real quick. Now I kind of massaged this hole manually because I kept putting it on, checking it, putting it on, checking it, and you can see, oh, that's nice. I have to push this forward just a little bit. I am just barely have enough clearance for this hole. So what I have to do now is I have to enlarge the hole just a little bit and allow this bolt to wiggle a little bit. It just doesn't have enough wiggle room to push down on this because I'm right on that hole now pretty much. You can see it right in there on the seat. Pretty much almost dead nuts aligned to it. So we're going to have to play with it. That's why I just went barely large enough with the hole. The bolt does go in, but it's kind of binding up on the edge of the hole, so you know this hole just needs to be massaged a little bit. But you can see back here we have a little different showing. It's a little further forward, but you know this thing is designed to catch up to there, so that's close enough. This is not supposed to be waterproof. Obviously, if it rains, it's fine. But we got that a little further away from the edge, in line with that spot on this form, whatever they put it into, which is just right in line with it this way, but just a little higher. So I like that. It looks good. That's going to be fine. As long as everything's fairly even and we can adjust this a little bit more by sanding it, leave the back alone, this will be fine. So I'm liking it. It looks really good. So yeah, we'll just I'll just finish this up off camera and get it so the bolts go in easy, it comes on and off easy. Then we have to turn our attention to what we're going to do with this pad, you know, the base for this pad at least. And I'll talk about what material I'm putting on it and so forth at that time. So the next thing I got to delve into is building the backing for that pad. And this is going to be tricky. In fact, I got to think on it for a little while. And I'll explain what I mean here in a minute. So I'm going to think on it, do a little doodling on the one of the sides of that piece I was showing you before. I'll give you an idea what I'm talking about. All right, so here's the challenge here. So if I take this piece and hold it up to here, you can see that this boss here is not at this angle, and this thing actually needs to be at that angle. I looked at the photos, so it's essentially flush up like this across of it, across the whole thing. So if I just put it on like this, you know, we'd have a space here and it would look like shit. So what we're going to have to do is again figure out the angle, and I'm going to try to figure out a way to fixture this. And I simply took a protractor and lined up to this, which is actually 90 degrees. So this surface to that surface, and then compared it to this surface here. So I'm just going, this is your reference surface, and I'm just comparing the two of them. And this one is at 73, 74 degrees. So it's about a 17 degree angle that I'd have to make on that to match this. All right, and then we'd have to come up with some relief on this. So actually it would be hogged out inside here too. But I think if we did the entire angle and then left that, or something like that, like I said, I got to think on this a little bit more. This protrudes into that space, so it would actually have to be the other way around. This would have to be lower at that angle. So That may be the answer to that. But either way, we're going to have to cut the angle on this whole thing. So I'm going to think on it a little bit more and see what we can do to fixture it, and we'll bring you back at that point. But that's the idea I have right now. It is kind of a complicated shape. The other thing we have to remember, of course, is this is actually shorter. It's going to be coming down below the surface here. So if this was the surface edge, it would be about here. All right, so that edge below, maybe about right there. And it also forms that arch. Now this is a perfect exercise in order of operations, because if we did that arching, shaping the ends of it, we wouldn't be able to really fixture it in a vise very well. So we have to leave it square. So the last thing to get done would be to take off a certain amount on the bottom to make that arch this way, and likewise on the top. But this is the main thing. That I'm not worried about. The main thing I'm concerned about is trying to figure out how we're going to cut that angle. And if we get this whole thing cut at that angle, okay, that means the thing's going to basically sit like that. I'll have to take a look at it from there. I'm not sure. I'm going to have to experiment a little bit with this. Alright folks, so here's my sketchy as hell setup. And yeah, the closest I can get is about a 15-degree angle, and what I did was I just took two different size parallels, which is absolutely not optimum. But it is in there pretty tight. But I think I got to be honest with you, as soon as this fly cutter starts whacking away at this, I think it's going to flip it right out of the thing. But remember, it is very soft material, and it has a lot of give. So because of that, we might earn a pass. But I'm just not sure. And I'm not going to run a terribly high RPM. I'm going to leave it set for where it's at. Yeah, what are you going to do, This is what's fun about this crap, is you get to experiment. Safety squints engaged. Oh hell, let's go for it. Like Don Johnson machine shop around here. I mean, sheesh. Okay, you see what I mean here? This is parallel and this is straight up and down like it should be. It shouldn't be necessarily like that or otherwise angled. But if it's flat up against there, we have the same situation, even if we did something like this, because we still have the thing is proud to it. So either way, I'm going to figure out how this goes. Actually, does it go this way? Not going to make any difference now. Yeah, it's thin up here, but remember, we have to cut this down. That's what we're going to do next in next operation. I'm not worried about fixturing it with a in the vise with an angle on it like that. That's usually pretty easy to do. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this down with a mill to a certain height. I'll do that off camera. I'm not really sure what height to make it yet. And bring it into that dimension. Then we got to figure out where to put the recesses in there to get this thing to set up in there at the right angle. These essentially have to be flush with whatever we put in here. It's about as far as I'd go with it because some of the height here is going to be consumed when we shape it. So it might be down actually about that far. We don't want it down quite that far, so maybe about right there. I'd say no lower than this, because otherwise you're going to be into that space. And I'll show you how we're going to do these to recess them. And once we recess them, we have to make a clearance around the outside for that material to come around. But that's something else. I'll show you how we'll do that as well. But I got an idea how we're going to do this. So I just need to mark it accurately, and then draw essentially some rectangles where these things would sit, because they are a little proud down there. And then remember, it's going to be like this. So we know what the angles are. We know what we need to put this at. If anything, yeah, we need to put it at the same angle. And then we'll get them cut. Let's do it. All right, folks, so this is the simple part, actually. I made a reference mark here to show you. This is the angle that we need to cut these recesses at, which, if you notice, is parallel with the bottom, which is the 90. I was originally going to work on that 90, and I said, wait a minute, I can't do that because I need that as my reference. The 90 always stays at the reference. So this is the angle that I cut. This is the angle that will put some relief in it, about a 1/4 inch deep, quarter, at the deepest point, which I'm not 100% sure where that is, but because this is repeatable, I can take it out and back in the vise no problem, because all we're doing is just relief cuts. Remember, this is bottom is 90 to this, so we're simply flipping that around in our head, so to speak, where we angled it 17 degrees off the 90 to get this cut. Now we're bringing it back up on the 90 to make this relief. I hope that it makes sense. Probably not saying it right, but you get my drift, I'm pretty sure. You know, I don't know if any of this shit's going to work, but we'll give it a shot, right? I mentioned just now that this is relief, so it's pretty, loose as far as tolerance goes. And in the length and the width of the X and the Y of this particular rectangular area, that's true. However, the depth reference to here, actually the depth reference to, I'm not really sure what it references to, I guess the outside edge here, because this goes up against the main part of that cowling, and then that other part protrudes through an angle, which is what we're going to mill here. Well, we don't want to go too far. We want that to butt up against that flat spot. We want this relief to fall into this. So in other words, when you put this up to this, the outside edge hits here, the inside of that hits there, and it's pretty close all around. You see what I'm saying? How we're going to do that is T and E, trial and error, because I'm not 100% sure how to calculate that. All I can tell you is that it's about 1/4 inch at the highest or deepest, but that's not going to translate across the entire thing because that's at an angle itself. That piece sticking out, it's kind of a weird shape. So I think what we're going to do is just kind of start in the middle and work our way down, take it out. Like I said, it's repeatable because it's on parallel, so I don't know. We're going to guess at this one. Well, folks, some days you got it, and some days you got it. And I just drew these lines freehand. The depth that I thought it would have to go, or the height in this case, because this is the bottom. And turns out those are exactly where this needed to be cut to. So if you put this in like that, boom. Now it's flush up against here. It's just hitting on those, pronounced areas, the mounting bosses, whatever you want to call them, these areas there, where the bolts or the studs from this side will eventually go through. I think that's going to work great. I mean, look at it. It's pretty good. Lined up real nice. So now we just have to make the curved features to it to make it blend in. I'm going to do those all by hand, off camera. You don't need to see all that. It's kind of mundane. Same with the bottom. Center here has got to be sanded out a little bit just to kind of accommodate this kind of curve on the seat. That'll make it go down just a teeny bit, but we do have that play right in there to do it. And we got plenty of thickness here. What I'm going to do with this is I'm going to end up going straight through from this side, or the inside, whatever you want to call it, and then putting a countersunk screw in, and then that'll poke through, and I'll put some of that glue from hell to hold that in place. It'll be a nice tight hole. I may actually even thread it. And then that'll stay no problem. And of course it'll go through here and capture on the back side with some nuts. Just like the OEM one does. The studs are on this, pretty sure. Yeah. So yeah, that's what we're going to do. I think it came out real nice. Now, I mentioned before about putting relief on the back here so we can wrap the material around and not see it. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that. I just don't have the real estate. I think we're just going to have to deal with that. And when I bring the material over, I'll bring it in more toward the centers, or the center here, and in further here, a couple staples. And that's why I left a little bit of material here on this instead of going all the way up flush. You see there's a little bit of a space there, and that's for clearance for a little bit of that material, to get behind there. I don't really know the thickness of it yet. I don't have it. But yeah, I think that'll work fine. Alright, so something like this, maybe a little bit more detail sanding, but you get the idea. Now, quick note on material. Naturally, I'm going to put some padding on this, maybe a 1/4, 3/8 inch of foam, some sort of a padding sticking out yay far. I haven't decided yet. The material I'm going to use is not this. This doesn't match good enough, but it's from a place called DiscountDesignerFabrics.com. These are 2 samples that I asked for. I went ahead and pulled the trigger on more of a gray color that I think is going to match this. This is like a bluish gray, but really a lot more gray in it than blue, I think. I'm pretty good about matching colors up. Took a shot on these though, and obviously that's a big fail. But what I'm going to do with this is, when it comes in, we'll pick the video back up, and then we'll go ahead and wrap this up by putting the screws in, and we'll get all this lined up, ready to go. Like I said, I got to source some foam. I'm not sure if I have any. And when we get that material in, I'll show you what that looks like. Should be only a couple days, but this is what we're going to do it with. It's actually a faux leather upholstery material, so I'm not sure if it's thicker than this stuff. I don't want it to look hokey or shitty. And then we'll use the stapler, the same one I used in that video way back to do the seat on the circus bike. A little 3/8 inch or 1/4 inch staples. Hopefully it doesn't shatter this thing, but it is pretty freaking strong. But shooting the staples in material this thin, I am a little concerned about it. And then once we get it wrapped up, it'll be done. So we're going to pick the video up when I get that shit in and get to that point, and you'll see the rest of this. Till then, I'm going to shut you off. We'll pick it up at that point. Hey guys, a couple days later, Ichabod and I are going to show you where we're at, and this is where we're at. This is what I got to show you, and I'm going to catch you up on how I got to this point. As you can see right off the bat that I have this upholstered. Not the greatest upholstery job. I'm not an upholsterer. I suck at it. You should see my Christmas present wrapping. I'll get to that here in a second. What I'm going to do is I'm going to explain how we got to this point by putting some B-roll in behind my narration. It'll be quicker that way, so let's get right to it. So the first thing I had to do was I had to pick some fasteners. I had to get some bolts that would come through the front. And what I mean by the front is, if you come back to the actual video here, I have 2 bolts that come through the front and are into that PVC and go through into the cowling, okay? So I took 2 bolts that are Allen cap bolts, the kind that have kind of a built-in washer or flange at the head of it on the thread side or the bolt side itself. Those bolts were not threaded all the way up. They had a little bit of a plain shank. So that worked out perfect the way I wanted to do it, because they were long enough, about 1.25 inches long. So what I did at that point was I took the bolts, put them in the lathe, and I faced them. I faced them down so just a thin piece left, which almost looks like the head of a nail. Did both of them that way. Then I took the piece of PVC, and I put the piece of PVC with the front side up, which is this side. And remember, the front side is parallel to those 2 pieces that are at a 15 or a 17 degree angle to this main body of it. They stick out, in other words, like that, all right? The reason I'll explain the reason why I did that. I wanted those straight through and not at an angle. The reason why I say angle is when you put those straight in, this is what happens. You see the difference in angle between this piece and this piece. And that's what ended up happening, and I'll get to that in a second, how I corrected it. So anyway, I took those bolts, set them aside. I put this piece of PVC in the mill, as I said, and I did 2 5mm holes and then I did a M6 tap. Now I took the M6 tap because that's an M6 bolt, and I wanted that hole that it pushes through to be really tight. So in other words, thread it through, get past the threads, and then pull the shank through and then seat the thing. But first, I flipped a piece of PVC over in the mill. I reset so that 15-degree angle was essentially gone. In other words, I leveled the part in the vise, again with a couple of parallels of different heights. And then I counterbored rather, those spots where that nail head, if you will, of those bolts goes through, because I wanted that flush with the face of the piece of PVC. That worked out well. So then I put the bolts in, screwed them through part of the way, and then pulled them through the rest of the way, or threaded them through the rest of the way with just an old drill chuck I got laying around. When they got most of the way through, put some super glue, and then sent them home. So the bolts are flush with the front face, and what I mean by front face is the front face here of the PVC, which is the body or the base for this pad. So now that's done. So now we get back to the difference in angle. So of course when I put it through, we have a difference in angle like this. And you can see from the clip I'm going to put in here that that's pretty vivid. So that wouldn't work out, because when you tighten the bolt, it would want to make it do this. It would want to throw it forward, and I wanted to keep that square. So to solve that, I had to make essentially a 15-degree tapered washer. So I took some aluminum of about 13 millimeter diameter. I just kind of turned it a little bit to clean up the outside. And it already had an M8 hole through, so that worked out because it was just for clearance. And then I put it in the mill. I milled that at a 15-degree angle, put it back in the lathe, and then parted it. So the thinnest part is about maybe a 1/16 of an inch, and the widest part is about maybe 1/4 or 3/8. So again, I made a tapered washer. So then I took those tapered washers and I put them on the inside of here, and you can see again, this is what it would be doing. It would be bringing this angle to here where the nuts come through. So the studs are going at that squareness, but not to here, to here. Remember, this is angled relative to the top. So now I have a tapered washer that brings the nut in, so it seats nice and flat, and therefore it won't try to influence this at all. All right? So then I got to the point where I said I need to make a pad now. So I got some pad material from one of those like sleeping pads, you take on camping trips. They're like I think 3/4 of an inch thick. So I cut that to fit the shape of the PVC, as you can see, and then just tack glued it in place. And that brings me up to the upholstery. So the upholstery, I did the best I could. It took me a couple hours and I put a lot of holes in this thing by shooting it with staples and taking them back out. So I had to make a decision. I had to either say, I need somebody to do this for me professionally, or I'm just going to stick it in and get it done. And I think it came out okay. I really don't like the visible pleats up here. It was the only way it would work. So it's nice and firm. I think it looks all right. I mean, it's not terrible, but it's not perfect, obviously. But it doesn't look too much like a piece of shit. But hey, I guess one man's piece of shit is another man's upholstery job. I don't know. So basically, that's where we're at right now. And I don't really have to worry about this opening with water getting into it or anything, because remember, this is a PVC piece, not a piece of wood, and the staples are stainless steel. 1/4 inch long, T50 Aero staples, stainless steel. So we're not going to have any corrosion in there anyway. Now you're not going to see any more on this. Any more on this, because what I have to do next is just finish sanding this. I still need to dial this hole in a little bit better and sand the edges a little bit more. Light sand the outside, and then prep it and paint it, and then put a clear on it. Yes, it's not going to match. I know that. Doesn't match now, but I'm going to get to it eventually. We'll get to this white, which is more like an off-white or almond white right now. We'll get to that eventually. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to do that for a while, because I got to nail these stickers down. These I can paint in, that's not a problem, and then put a new Honda sticker on. But these guys, I'm not sure. So anyway, that's good. I just wanted to update you and tell you where we're at, and hopefully you enjoyed it. He seems to enjoy the crap out of it, so as long as the dog's happy, I guess everybody's happy. So if you want to make me happy and you like the video, give me a thumbs up. Doesn't cost you a cent, helps me out tremendously. If you want to see more projects like this, on my channel, I recommend subscribing and ringing the bell. YouTube isn't always great about notifying you just from a subscription, so I'd recommend doing both. So until next time, of course, I want to say don't just repair, restore, and catch you on the next video. And as always, thank you for watching. Take care.